Hey everybody, Johnny Bluesit here. Today I want to talk to you about artistic style. So, when you're an old geezer, a question that you get a lot from younger artists is about personal style. Like, how do I develop a personal style? What kind of personal style should I have? What's the best one to have? Before we get started, a couple of disclaimers are in order. First of all, if you are trying to be a professional and you're trying to get a job at Disney or Marvel or what have you, you're probably going to have to learn to draw in the house style, and there's nothing for it. I don't have a lot to say about that because I'm strictly an amateur. I use art strictly as a tool of personal exploration and discovery of the world around me, and everything I talk about is from that point of view. So even though I tend to talk as though my personal opinions were handed down by God from Mount Sinai or something, I'm just a pain in the ass that way. The truth is everything's coming from my point of view, so you have to bear that in mind. So, let's start at the beginning with what is style. So I've thought about this a great deal, and I think if you think about it long enough, you come to the inevitable conclusion that styles are filters on reality. If you take something realistic and you emphasize certain things, de-emphasize other things, modify it in a certain way, you have a style. So let's take a style that we all know and we're all familiar with, manga. We know what manga is. It's spiky hair, big eyes, narrow noses and chins, little mouths, faces that are simplified in that certain way. You do that and kapow, you've got manga. So if you're a beginner, or even if you're experienced and you're grappling with something unfamiliar, you may be best served by trying to render it as realistically as possible in the medium that you're using to try to wrap your head around it before you start imposing style filters over it. In a way, you can think of realism as being sort of the root of the style tree. If you started with realism and you get bored of the style that you're doing, you can always backtrack back to realism and then sort of shoot down another branch of the style tree. Whereas if you learned how to draw by drawing manga and you've never done anything else, I'm picking on manga here, but I'm just using it as an example. If you get bored of that style, you may find it more difficult to switch styles later down the line. So, I actually didn't want a style when I first started drawing again after a long layoff. I was doing a lot of comics projects with friends of mine, and I wanted the freedom to be able to choose a look and feel that was appropriate to the thing that we're making, to be able to develop a style for the project. And I have a friend from the comics club who's a really fabulous oil painter, and she's been to art school, and she's just great. And she insists that anybody can learn to draw in any style. And that may be true to a degree. You can get quite a bit of versatility if you put your mind to it. And yet, everything that I draw does end up looking like I drew it. So that tends to suggest that there are things that you can change and things that you can't change. So, after thinking about it for a long time, I came to the conclusion that the things that you can't change fall into three categories. Number one is things that are hardwired into your visual perceptual system, the way you see the world. Thing number two is your personal dislikes. You're going to find it very difficult to get really good at something you genuinely dislike. And I'm not just talking about something that you dislike because it's hard for you, because you don't know how to draw in perspective, for example. I'm talking about stuff that's in your core, stuff that you're just hardwired not to like and you're just never going to like it. And then number three is whatever style you draw in, a style is a visual language. And so the language needs to have the vocabulary to say what you're trying to say. Another artist may be a lot more advanced than you are, even, and yet their style, their visual language, may be lacking vocabulary for things that you're trying to say. So let's do a deep dive into each one of those three categories. Check out this drawing by illustrator Vincent Locke. Locke uses a lot of middle grays in his drawings. Whenever I try to do that, the result looks really muddy and messy and kind of horrible. Locke sees midtones with a lot more visual acuity than I do. Whenever I try to do what he does, it somehow never works out. I need to simplify my midtones a lot more. I tend to draw in white, black, and maybe one or two middle grays at the most. This painting is by the great James Gurney, and he sees color in a way that I don't, and probably never will. This drawing is by the French cartoonist Mobius, who is one of my favorite cartoonists. Nevertheless, I really don't like trying to draw as cleanly as he does. Doing anything that slowly and carefully drives me slowly mad. Before long, I revert to what I like to do. There's a certain freneticism built into me, and it wants to come out. Now, one thing you have to be careful of here is I'm not talking about things that you don't like to do because you don't know how to do them. There was a time when I didn't like to draw anything man-made or mechanical because I didn't have my perspective drafting down. But then once I knuckled down and learned perspective drafting, man-made geometrical objects became my favorite things to draw. So this isn't the same thing as something that's a real dislike that's built into your personality. For example, I don't like drawing flowers. I'm just not interested in flowers. I'm never going to be interested in them. This painting is by Israeli watercolorist Liron Yankonsky. Notice how Yankonsky is mainly interested in the relationship between abstract shapes of color. He's removed all the details from his paintings because he's not interested in details, and he's reduced everything to these abstract planes. My drawings, on the other hand, tend to be about my fascination with three-dimensional polygons, and also about the story of this world that I've created. In order to tell that story, I need to show you a certain level of detail. Yankonsky's visual language doesn't have the vocabulary to tell the story I want to tell, even though he's arguably a much more advanced watercolorist than I am. So I think the big takeaway here is that the best way to develop your personal style is to ignore matters of style completely. Really thinking about style isn't worthy of your time and attention. The only questions that are worthwhile are the fundamental questions, which are the questions of form and volume, light and shadow, texture, anatomy, perspective, the real building blocks of art. If you focus on that, I think your style will take care of itself. Remember that everything you draw is going to look like you drew it, and you couldn't stop that happening even if you wanted to. So as you plow ahead in your art journey over the course of time, of course you'll see other artists do things that really click or really resonate with you. And you'll tend to, steal those pieces and throw them into your own personal soup. That's pretty much the way every artist develops. Nevertheless, the soup is uniquely yours, and whatever fish heads and beer cans and old sweat socks and whatever is floating around, it's all uniquely you. You can ape somebody else's style, but you can't really draw like somebody else, and I think it's a mistake to try. So anyway, I hope this was helpful to somebody out there. And if you want to check out my finished portfolio pieces, go to http://bluesit.com, which will take you to my Behance site. And I'm Bluesit on Instagram, and you can see more works in progress and urban sketches and experiments and the occasional failure. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.